So AMP pivoting away from 170 years of history.
Peter, good morning. I'll tell you what, it's both monumental and frankly about time. They've spent the last 20 years with the share price just being chipped away and chipped away and chipped away, now barely over $1. And the company finally, on the back of the Royal Commission and other things, saying we can no longer be what they call vertically integrated. We can no longer be financial advisors and product sellers. And they're basically going to retire a whole lot of the AMP funds, not make their advisors do it, let their advisors take clients with them if they leave AMP as a financial brokerage. It is a very, very big, monumental change to the business model. Is it too little, too late? I guess that will remain to be seen. On the plus side, the AMP brand still stands for a lot. It's still super recognisable among a decent portion of the community. When I was a kid, the AMP, it was called the AMP back then, was the national name in financial services. Maybe they can wrest some of that back, but this does feel a little bit like the last throw of the dice. Modernise or give up is kind of the story, and they're choosing to try desperately to catch up with 20 or 30 years of, frankly, missed opportunities, and hopefully for them and their long-suffering shareholders, they can finally do that in 2021.
I tell you what, speaking of suffering shareholders, what about Crown just over the last couple of weeks? Scott, James Packer, he's lost about $500 million in the total value of Crown over the past few months. What do you think there's much further to fall there? Is it getting into buy zone territory, or would you still be very, very cautious?
It's extraordinary, isn't it, Pete? I think the problem with Crown, I'm going to desperately try and avoid betting metaphors, mate, and puns as I answer your question. But the challenge for Crown is that we don't yet know how bad the Royal Commission outcome could be, particularly in Victoria. In WA, there's even been conversation about whether Crown should be split up. And so I guess the risk for investors right now is we're still dealing with an unknown downside. And whenever that's the case, particularly for an underperforming business like Crown, you say, well, if everything goes well, if this is a storm in a teacup, if it all passes in 2 years' time, we look back and say, gee, that was a slap on the wrist with a wet lettuce leaf, then yeah, the shares are really cheap. If one of those Royal Commissions, one of the gambling regulators says, hey guys, we want fundamental, substantial change in some particularly damaging way, then the shares could still have another 25 or 30% to fall. And I think that is the risk. That is the gamble you take if you're buying Crown shares. It's a real challenge, I think, for shareholders. And look, it's too spicy for me right now.
I would have thought so too, yeah. Get the feeling there's going to be a bit more further to fall on that front. Meanwhile, Scott, there are reports this morning the federal government is looking to boost COVID support payments. It's not going to call it JobKeeper, though. It may well be something else, but there's some suggestions, particularly in the AFR this morning, that it may well return to $750 a week, which was the first stage of JobKeeper last year.
Yeah, Peter, and I think this is the real challenge for the government right now. It's partly about how much cash, but it's also, for me, about the confidence word. Do we feel like there's a blanket coverage? Do we feel like the government's got our backs? Are we going to get out of this? Whether I say we, employees, employers, business groups, the whole lot, do we feel like they're doing enough? We know last year the first couple of stimulus packages were too little, and then all of a sudden JobKeeper and JobSeeker arrived, and it was a big bang, and it got the economy roaring really fast. Once we got out of that recession, we're at a decade low unemployment rate. It really, really worked. The challenge here is, even if the cash is enough, do businesses, do employees feel like it's enough? Do they feel like they're going to be supported through this, or are they still not sure? And I think that, for me, is the patchwork question. There's eligibility rules based on region, based on business circumstance, a whole lot of stuff. The package is absolutely worth it. An increase would be well and truly welcome, I think, to get particularly New South Wales through this next month or two. But the bigger question is, do people feel it? Are we really going to go and keep spending? Are businesses going to keep hiring and investing? That's the key challenge, because if they don't, then the cash is not going to be enough, ironically, even if it's the same as it was last year.
Okay, Scott Phillips, appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Peter.